I was standing in front of my antique floor mirror, adjusting my silk bow tie, holding the heavy brass key to a $950,000 penthouse in the Back Bay district of Boston. It was supposed to be the ultimate wedding gift for my only son Brandon and his fiancée Valerie. But then my phone vibrated against the marble countertop. One text message from an unknown number changed everything. "Don't go to the wedding. Run. You are in danger." Most men my age would have panicked. I didn't. I called the number back immediately. And what I heard on the other end was not a prank. It was the sound of my entire life unraveling. My son wasn't just getting married. He was planning to bury me alive. Before I continue this story of betrayal and cold justice, please like this video and subscribe to my channel. Let me know in the comments where you are watching from. My name is Garrison Ford. I am 70 years old. For 40 years, I swam with the sharks in the Boston real estate market. I built skyscrapers from mud and negotiated deals that made grown men cry. I thought I had seen every form of greed and treachery the human heart was capable of manufacturing. I was wrong. The worst kind of greed doesn't come from a competitor across a boardroom table. It comes from the blood of your blood sitting across from you at the breakfast table. That morning, the house was quiet. It was the silence of a large, empty mansion that had once held a family. My wife had passed 5 years ago, leaving me alone with a $50 million estate and a son who had never worked a hard day in his life. Brandon was 35. He was handsome, charming, and completely hollow. He looked like me, but he had none of my grit. He had spent his 20s trying to be a tech entrepreneur with my capital, and his 30s trying to be a socialite with my credit cards. And now he was marrying Valerie. Valerie was beautiful in the way a diamond is beautiful. Cold, sharp, and expensive. She was a former runway model who had transitioned into being an Instagram influencer. I had never trusted her. Her eyes always lingered a little too long on my art collection and my vintage cars. But Brandon seemed happy. Or at least he seemed relieved to have someone to manage his chaotic life. So I did what fathers do. I wrote the checks. I paid for the $40,000 venue. I paid for the catering. And I bought the penthouse apartment so they wouldn't have to live in my guest wing anymore. I picked up the key again. It felt heavy in my palm. Cold. I was ready to drive to the hotel. I was ready to smile and shake hands and play the role of the proud patriarch. Then the phone buzzed. I looked at the screen. The message was short. Urgent. Don't go to the wedding. Run. You are in danger. I stared at the words. My first instinct wasn't fear. It was calculation. Who sent this? Why now? Was it a threat, a warning? Most people would delete it or call the police. I did neither. I pressed the call button. I needed to know the enemy. The phone rang 3 times. Then a man's voice answered. He sounded out of breath, as if he was walking fast or hiding. "Who is this?" I asked. My voice was calm. It was the voice I used when I fired executives. "Mr. Ford," the voice whispered, "you actually called back. You need to listen to me. You aren't safe." I repeated my question. "Who is this?" "My name is Liam. I'm Valerie's personal trainer." "Look, I shouldn't be telling you this. They'll kill me if they find out, but I can't let them do it. It's too sick. Do what I asked." My grip on the phone tightened. "They aren't just getting married today, Mr. Ford. They are executing a plan. The wedding is a trap." "A trap," I scoffed. "What are they going to do? Liam, attack me in front of 200 of Boston's elite? No. They are going to erase you." Liam took a breath, and what he said next froze the blood in my veins. "Valerie isn't in love with Brandon. She hates him. She thinks he's weak. But she loves your money. And the baby. The baby she's carrying. It's not Brandon's. It's mine." I felt a sharp pain in my chest, but I ignored it. A fake pregnancy or an affair was standard gold digger behavior. I could handle that. I could disinherit them. But Liam wasn't finished. That's not the danger, Mr. Ford. The baby is just the insurance policy. The real plan is the conservatorship. I went still. Conservatorship. The legal tool used to take control of an adult's life and finances when they are deemed mentally unfit. What are you talking about? I asked. My voice dropped an octave. They've been drugging you, Mr. Ford, for the last 3 months. The vitamins Brandon brings you every week. The brain health supplements. They aren't vitamins. I looked toward my nightstand, where a bottle of expensive herbal supplements sat. Brandon insisted I take them. He said he was worried about my memory. He said I was getting forgetful. They are dosing you with a cocktail of sedatives and hallucinogens, Liam continued. Small doses, just enough to make you foggy. Just enough to make your hands shake. Just enough to make you forget where you put your keys or repeat stories. They've been recording you when you're confused. They've been building a filmahapal. I closed my eyes. Images flashed through my mind. Last week I had forgotten the security code to my own gate. 2 days ago I had dropped a glass of water because my hand spasmed. I thought it was age. I thought it was Parkinson's starting. I had even thanked Brandon for his concern when he cleaned up the glass. Tonight at the reception, Liam's voice was shaking now. They have a Dr. Aris. He's on their payroll. During the toasts, Brandon is going to announce that your health has taken a turn. He's going to say you're having an episode. The doctor is going to inject you with a high dose of haloperidol. It will make you slur your words. You'll drool. You'll look aggressive and confused. They'll have you restrained and taken straight to a private mental health facility in the Berkshires. By Monday morning, Brandon will have emergency temporary guardianship. By Friday, they'll have full control of the estate. I stood there in my tuxedo in my beautiful empty house and I felt a coldness I had never known. It wasn't the air conditioning. It was the realization that the son I had held in my arms as a baby had looked at me and decided I was worth more as a vegetable than as a father. Why are you telling me this, Liam? I asked. If you're the father of the baby, you stand to gain from this too. Because Valerie told me she's going to cut me out once she has the money, Liam said. She laughed about it. She said she'd pay me off with a used car. And my own grandfather died in a home like that. I can't let them do that to you. It's evil. I stayed silent for 3 seconds. 3 seconds is a long time in a negotiation. It's enough time to decide whether to fold or go all in. Do you have proof? I asked. I have the DNA test results for the baby, Liam said. And I have screenshots of their texts with Dr. Aris planning the dosage for tonight. Send them to me. Now. I hung up the phone. I didn't sit down. I didn't cry. I walked into the bathroom and grabbed the bottle of supplements. I poured the capsules into a plastic bag. I looked at them closely. They weren't vitamins. I had been taking poison from the hand of my own son. I remembered Brandon's face 3 days ago. He had looked at me with such pity. Dad, are you sure you're okay? You seem confused again. Maybe you should rest. It was a performance, a script. He was gaslighting me into my own grave. I looked at my reflection in the mirror. I saw the gray hair. I saw the wrinkles. But behind the eyes, I saw the shark that had eaten alive the toughest developers in the city in the 80s. They thought I was a senile old man. They thought I was a lamb ready for the slaughter. They had made a fatal miscalculation. They forgot that I was the one who taught them how to hunt. I picked up my phone again. I didn't call the police. The police are for victims. The police take reports after the crime is committed. I needed something faster. I needed a weapon. I dialed Fiona. Fiona was my attorney for 30 years. She was a woman who scared the devil himself. She answered on the first ring. Garrison. It's Saturday. I assume the wedding is off or you need a prenup signed in the limo. Fiona, listen to me carefully, I said. I am sending you a file. It contains text messages and a DNA report. I need you to bring the private security team, not the usual guys. I want the Wolfpack, the ones we used for the waterfront strike. Garrison. What is going on? My son is planning a coup. Fiona, a hostile takeover of my life. He plans to have me committed tonight at the reception. There was a silence on the line, then the sound of a glass being set down hard. Where do you want us? She asked. Her voice had shifted from friend to war general. The Plaza Hotel. I want you to draft a revocation of all power of attorney documents immediately. I want a restraining order prepared. And Fiona, yes. Draft the papers to strip him of everything. The trust funds, the car, the apartment lease. I want him naked in the street by midnight. Consider it done. Garrison, are you okay? I looked at the bag of pills in my hand. No, Fiona. I am not okay. I am angry, and that is much worse for them. I hung up the phone and put the bag of pills in my tuxedo pocket. I adjusted my tie. I picked up the key to the penthouse. I wouldn't leave it behind. It was going to be part of the show. They wanted a scene. They wanted a dramatic medical episode to prove I was unfit. I would give them a performance, but it wouldn't be the one they wrote. I walked out to my vintage Rolls-Royce. I didn't take the driver. I drove myself. I needed to feel the wheel in my hands. I needed to know I was in control. The drive to the plaza was a blur of red lights and anger. I thought about every birthday party I threw for Brandon. I thought about the time I bailed him out of jail when he was 21 for drunk driving and paid the best lawyers to keep his record clean. I thought about Valerie smiling at me over Thanksgiving dinner, asking about my blood pressure while calculating how long it would take for my heart to stop. They saw me as a resource, an obstacle, a bank vault with a heartbeat. I pulled up to the valet. The hotel was glowing. Expensive flowers, red carpet. It was a wedding fit for a prince. My money had paid for every petal. Brandon and Valerie were standing at the entrance greeting guests. They looked perfect. The golden couple. Brandon saw me and jogged over. He looked concerned. The mask was already on. Dad, he said, grabbing my arm a little too tightly. You drove yourself. I told you I'd send a car. You know you shouldn't be driving with your episodes. I looked at him. I let my hand tremble just a little. I let my eyes drift out of focus for a second. I saw the satisfaction in his eyes. He thought the drugs were working. I forgot, son, I mumbled. I wanted to be here. Valerie glided over. She kissed my cheek. She smelled of expensive perfume and betrayal. Oh, Garrison, we are so glad you made it, she cooed. We have a special table for you right up front, near the exit, just in case you need fresh air or medical attention. She exchanged a quick glance with a pal standing by the pillar. He was wearing a dark suit, but he had the posture of a doctor. Dr. Eris, the executioner. I smiled at them, a weak, shaky old man smile. I have a surprise for you too, I said, patting my pocket where the penthouse key sat next to the poison pills. A big surprise. Brandon's eyes lit up. Greed. Pure, unadulterated greed. You shouldn't have, Dad, he said. Oh, but I did. And I'm going to give it to you during the speeches. I want everyone to see. I walked past them into the hall. The trap was set. The players were in position. I took my seat at the front table. I poured a glass of water, but I didn't drink it. I watched Dr. Eris move closer. I watched Brandon whispering to the head of catering. They thought they were writing the ending to my story. They thought this was the final chapter of Garrison Ford. They didn't know that I had just rewritten the script. And in my version, the ending wasn't a tragedy. It was a massacre. I checked my watch. Fiona would be here in 20 minutes. The security team was already infiltrating the side entrances. I sat back and waited for the show to begin. My hands stopped shaking. My vision cleared. The shark was awake, and it was hungry. The ceremony was a blur of lies. I sat in the front row watching Valerie walk down the aisle. She cried fake tears. Brandon looked at her with fake adoration. The officiant spoke about loyalty and trust and honor. I wanted to stand up and scream. I wanted to vomit, but I sat there like a good, feeble old man. I clapped when they kissed. I even wiped a non-existent tear from my eye when Brandon looked at me. He nodded at me, a gesture of reassurance. "Don't worry, Dad, I've got you." It was the nod of a Judas. After the ceremony, we moved to the ballroom. It was extravagant. Crystal chandeliers, a 10-piece band, caviar stations. I calculated the cost in my head. $50,000 easily. My money. Spending my money to celebrate my own demise. Brandon came over to me before the dinner service began. He guided me toward a small private room off the main hall. "Dad, let's just take a minute," he said. "It's loud in there. You look a bit pale." Valerie was there too. "And Dr. Era." "Who is this?" I asked, letting my voice quaver. "This is Dr. Aris, Dad," Brandon said. "He's a guest, but he's also a friend. He just wants to check your vitals. You know to be safe." Dr. Aris stepped forward. He had cold, clammy hands. He took my pulse. His heart rate is elevated, he lied. He didn't even look at his watch. He's agitated. "I'm just excited," I said. "It's a big day." Brandon pulled a folder from his jacket. It was thick. "Dad, while we have a quiet moment," I was thinking, "you know how stressed you get about the properties and the accounts. I think it would be better if you signed this. It just lets me handle the boring stuff for you, so you can relax." I looked at the papers. I didn't need my reading glasses to know what they were. Power of attorney. Durable. Immediate. Irrevocable. "Right now," I asked. "At the wedding, it's the best time," Dad, Valerie said, stroking my shoulder. "One less thing to worry about. Just sign it and we can go cut the cake." I picked up the pen. My hand shook violently. I made sure of it. I dropped the pen on the floor. "Oh, clumsy me," I muttered. I bent down to pick it up. As I was under the table, I quickly stuck a small coin-sized device to the underside of the mahogany wood. A listening bug. Fiona had given it to me months ago for corporate espionage. I never thought I'd use it on my son. I came back up. I didn't sign the paper. I need to eat first," I said. "I feel weak. Let me sign it after the cake. Please, I want to give you my gift first." Brandon looked annoyed. He looked at Dr. Aris. The doctor gave a slight nod. "Let him eat. The drugs will work better with food." "Okay, Dad," Brandon said, forcing a smile. "After the cake. But then you sign. We're doing this for you." "For me," I repeated. "Of course." We went back into the ballroom. I sat at my table. I didn't touch the food. I knew the waiters were instructed to dose my champagne. I watched Brandon and Valerie work the room. They were glowing. They were shaking hands, accepting envelopes of cash, laughing. They looked like royalty. I checked my phone under the table. A text from Fiona. "We are in position. Wait for the signal." I looked around the room. I saw the security guards. Not the hotel security. My security. They were dressed as guests, but I knew them. That was Big Mike by the bar. That was Sarah near the DJ booth. They were watching me, waiting for my command. The speeches began. The best man told a story about Brandon's college days, omitting the DU-is and the expelled semesters. The maid of honor cried about how Valerie was the most honest person she knew. I almost laughed out loud. Then it was Brandon's turn. He took the microphone. The room went silent. "Thank you all for coming," he said. His voice was thick with emotion. Fake emotion. "Today is the happiest day of my life, but it is also a difficult one." Here it comes, I thought. The setup. My father, Garrison Ford, is my hero. Brandon continued. He built an empire. But as many of you know, time comes for us all. Lately, Dad hasn't been himself. He's been struggling. He looked at me with a sad, pitying expression. The spotlight swung to my table. 200 people turned to look at the poor, senile billionaire. "Dad." "I love you," Brandon said. "And Valerie and I promise to take care of you, no matter how hard it gets." The crowd applauded. Some people wiped tears. It was a masterclass in manipulation. He was publicly establishing my decline. He was preparing the witnesses. Dr. Aris moved closer to my chair. I saw a syringe hidden in his palm. He was going to do it now. He was going to sedate me while everyone was clapping so it would look like medical aid. I stood up. The applause died down. I walked toward the stage. I didn't use my cane. I didn't shuffle. I walked with the stride of a CEO entering a hostile takeover meeting. Brandon looked confused. He tried to block the microphone. "Dad, sit down, you need to rest." I took the microphone from his hand. I didn't snatch it. I just took it with an authority he couldn't resist. I turned to the crowd. "Thank you, Brandon," I said. My voice was clear, strong. It boomed through the speakers. There was no slur, no confusion. My son is right. I have been struggling lately. I have been struggling to understand how I raised a son who would drug his own father to steal his money. The room went dead silent. You could hear a pin drop. Brandon's face went white. "Dad, what are you doing?" "You're having an episode." "Dr. Aris, help him." Dr. Aris lunged forward. Now I yelled. Big Mike and 2 other security agents stepped out from the crowd. They intercepted Dr. Aris before he could reach me. They twisted his arm behind his back. The syringe fell to the floor and rolled across the stage. Valerie screamed. Brandon tried to grab me. "You're crazy," he yelled. "This is the dementia." I pulled the remote control from my pocket. "Let's see how crazy I am," I said. I pointed the remote at the giant projection screen behind us, which was displaying a slideshow of Brandon and Valerie's photos. I pressed the button. The screen went black. Then a video started playing. It was grainy, low light, but the audio was crystal clear. It was a recording from the bug I had placed under the table in the private room 20 minutes ago. Brandon's voice boomed through the ballroom. "Once he signs the power of attorney, we ship him to the facility. Dr. Aris said if we keep the dosage high, he won't even know his own name in a week." Valerie's voice followed. "Good. I don't want him around when the baby comes. He's disgusting. And make sure we sell the Rolls-Royce first. I want that cash for the remodel." The video looped. "He's disgusting. Ship him to the facility." The guests gasped. People stood up. Chairs scraped against the floor. The shock was physical. It hit the room like a wave. I looked at Brandon. He was frozen. His mouth was open. The mask was gone. There was only terror. I wasn't done. I pulled the bag of pills from my pocket. I held them up. "These are the vitamins my son has been feeding me," I announced. "I had them tested this morning. They contain haloperidol and scopolamine, enough to kill a horse." I threw the bag at his feet. And this, I pulled out the DNA report Liam had sent me. "This is the paternity test for my future grandchild." Valerie tried to run toward me. Don't read that. Security blocked her. Brandon, look at your wife, I said. Look at her. Because the baby isn't yours. It belongs to her personal trainer, Liam. Brandon turned to Valerie. His face was purple. Is it true? He screamed. Valerie didn't answer. She just looked at me with pure hatred. You old bastard, you ruined everything. No, I said coldly. I didn't ruin anything, I just turned on the lights. Fiona walked onto the stage. She was flanked by two uniformed police officers, Brandon Ford and Valerie Stone, she said. You are under arrest for conspiracy to commit murder, elder abuse, and attempted fraud. The officers moved in. They cuffed Brandon. He started crying. Sobs. Ugly, heaving sobs. Dad. Please, it was her idea. She made me do it. I'm sorry, Dad. I looked at him. My son. The boy I taught to ride a bike. The boy I sat up with when he had a fever. I walked over to him. I leaned in close. You wanted the penthouse, I whispered. I pulled the brass key from my pocket. The key to the $950,000 apartment. I dropped it into his pocket. Keep it. You'll need something to remember me by while you're in prison. But don't worry about the rent. I sold the building this morning. The police dragged them out. The wedding guests watched in horror. The cake sat uncut. The champagne went flat. I walked out of the ballroom. I walked past the crying bride and the begging son. I didn't look back. I got into my Rolls Royce. I felt lighter than I had in years. I had lost a son, but I had saved my life. I drove to the airport. My private jet was waiting. I had a flight plan filed for Italy. I was going to spend my retirement on a vineyard, alone, safe, and free. Family isn't blood. Family is loyalty. And if you don't have loyalty, you have nothing. Don't forget to subscribe for more stories of justice. And remember, trust is good, but control is better. The valet opened the door of my Rolls Royce, and the humid Boston air hit me instantly, carrying the scent of expensive lilies and exhaust fumes. I took a moment before stepping out. This was the threshold. Inside the ballroom of the plaza, 200 of the city's elite were waiting. They were politicians I had funded, developers I had crushed, and socialites I had tolerated for decades. They were there to drink my champagne and witness the twilight of the great Garrison Ford. To them, this was the social event of the season. To my son and his bride, it was a coronation. But to me, it was a crime scene. I looked at my hands resting on the steering wheel. They were steady, strong. The hands of a man who had built a $50 million empire from concrete and steel. But that wasn't the man who needed to walk up those stairs. I closed my eyes and exhaled slowly, letting the tension drain from my muscles, but not in a way that brought relief. I let my shoulders slump forward. I relaxed my jaw until my mouth hung slightly open. I focused on my right hand and forced a rhythmic tremor into my fingers. It was a performance technique I had used only once before, during a negotiation in '92, when I wanted a competitor to think I was too weak to fight a hostile takeover. I crushed him a week later. Today, the stakes were infinitely higher. I stepped out of the car. My foot caught slightly on the curb. A calculated stumble. A flashbulb popped nearby, blinding me for a second. I blinked rapidly, letting my eyes dart around with feigned confusion, as if the noise and lights were overwhelming my senses. The valet reached out to steady me. "Thank you, son," I mumbled, my voice pitched intentionally thin and raspy. "I just need a moment." The young man looked at me with pity. That was good. Pity was the currency I needed to trade in right now. Pity would make them careless. I walked toward the grand entrance. The red carpet felt soft beneath my shoes like quicksand. The double doors swung open, and the noise of the pre-reception cocktail hour washed over me. The room was a sea of tuxedos and designer gowns. It smelled of money and ambition, I saw faces I recognized. Old rivals, former partners. They looked at me and then quickly looked away or whispered behind their champagne flutes. I knew what they were saying. Look at Garrison. He's losing it. A shame, really. They had bought the narrative Brandon had been selling for months. Then I saw them. Brandon and Valerie were holding court near the center of the lobby, beneath a crystal chandelier that cost more than most people earned in a year. They looked like the perfect American couple. Brandon was tall and broad in a custom midnight blue tuxedo, his smile plastered on like a billboard advertisement. Valerie was a vision in white silk and diamonds, her hand resting protectively over her stomach. The stomach that held a child she claimed was my grandson but belonged to another man. They were laughing at something a senator was saying, their heads thrown back in synchronized joy. It was a beautiful picture. It was a lie so polished it shined. Brandon spotted me first. His smile didn't waver, but his eyes narrowed. He said something to the senator, excused himself, and started walking toward me. His pace was brisk, urgent. He wasn't walking toward a father he loved. He was walking toward a loose cannon he needed to secure. Valerie followed him, her long train gliding over the marble floor. Dad Brandon called out, his voice booming with performative warmth. He reached me and grabbed my shoulders. His grip was tight. Too tight. It wasn't an embrace, it was a restraint. You made it. We were getting worried when the car didn't show up. I let my head bob slightly. I looked past him, my eyes unfocused. I didn't wait for the car. I stammered, letting a little bit of saliva gather at the corner of my mouth. I drove. I wanted to see the flowers. Valerie arrived at his side. She looped her arm through mine. Her skin was cold. She leaned in close, and I smelled the cloying sweetness of her perfume masking the scent of the cigarette she must have smoked outside minutes ago. "Oh, Garrison, we are so happy you are here," she cooed. Her voice was like syrup poured over broken glass. "You look tired, though. Are you feeling all right? Did you take your medicine like Brandon reminded you?" She was checking. She was probing to see if the poison was in my system. I looked at her. I let my hand shake violently against her arm. I think so," I whispered. "I took the blue ones. Or maybe the red ones. I feel floaty." I saw the look that passed between them. It was subtle. A micro-expression that lasted less than a second. But I saw it. It was relief. They thought the cocktail of sedatives and hallucinogens they had prepared was taking hold. They thought the shark was declawed. Brandon laughed, a sound that was meant to be reassuring to the onlookers, but sounded hollow to me. "That's okay, Dad. The excitement gets to all of us. Let's get you inside. We have a special spot for you." He tried to guide me forward, but I planted my feet. I needed to sell this. I needed them to be absolutely certain I was incompetent. "Wait," I said, my voice rising in a panic that wasn't entirely fake. "The key. I brought the key. For the house." "Shh, Dad." Brandon hissed, his smile straining at the edges. "Not now. We'll do the gifts later. Everyone is watching." I looked around frantically, acting the part of the confused geriatric. "But I need to give it to you." "It's expensive, Brandon. Very expensive." Valerie squeezed my arm harder, her nails digging into my suit jacket. She leaned into Brandon. Her lips barely moved, but I was listening. I was listening with every fiber of my being. "He's cooked," she whispered. Her voice was low, a venomous hiss meant only for my son. "He's barely standing." The doctor was right. The double dose did the trick. "Let's get him to the back before he starts drooling on the guests." Brandon nodded imperceptibly. "Just keep smiling, Val," he muttered back. "We are almost there. Just get him to the room." They flanked me like prison guards escorting a convict to the chair. Brandon on my left, Valerie on my right. They marched me through the lobby. I stumbled again, and Brandon hoisted me up. To the crowd, it looked like a son supporting his frail father. A touching moment. I saw people smiling at us, nodding approvingly. Look at Brandon Ford taking care of the old man. Such a good son, if they only knew, if they knew that the hands holding me up were the same hands that had swapped my heart medication for psychotropic drugs. If they knew that the woman smiling at me was planning to lock me in a facility and sell my home before my bed was even cold. We moved past the reception desk. I saw the doctor they had hired standing near a pillar. Dr. Aris. He wasn't wearing a tuxedo. He was wearing a dark suit that looked too large for him. He was watching us with the cold, clinical detachment of a butcher eyeing a steer. He caught Brandon's eye and gave a small, almost imperceptible nod. He touched his jacket pocket. I knew what was in there. The syringe. The final silencer. My heart hammered against my ribs, but I forced my breathing to remain shallow and erratic. I had to maintain the illusion. I let my head loll onto Brandon's shoulder. I'm tired, son, I mumbled. I just want to sit down. We're going to sit down, Dad, Brandon said. His voice was smooth, calm. We have a nice, quiet room for you. Just for a few minutes. Before the big party, you can rest there. He wasn't taking me to a VIP lounge. He was taking me to the slaughterhouse. A private room where there were no witnesses, where Dr. Aris could administer the shot that would turn me into a drooling invalid just in time for the ambulance to arrive. It was a solid plan, a brutal, efficient plan. But they had made one critical error. They assumed the man stumbling between them was Garrison Ford, the victim. They didn't realize they were walking arm in arm with Garrison Ford, the executioner. And as we crossed the threshold from the public lobby into the private corridor, I tightened my grip on the voice recorder hidden in my pocket. The stage was set. The actors were in place, and I was about to deliver the performance of a lifetime. The heavy oak door clicked shut behind us, cutting off the murmur of the crowd and the clinking of champagne flutes, leaving us in a sudden, suffocating silence. The private room was small, designed for intimate business deals or high-stakes poker games, but at that moment it felt like an execution chamber, disguised with velvet drapes and mahogany paneling. The air conditioning was humming a low, monotonous drone that seemed to vibrate against my skin. Brandon guided me toward a stiff, high-backed chair at the head of a long, polished table. He didn't offer me the comfortable leather armchair in the corner. He wanted me upright. He wanted me exposed. Valerie leaned against the door, her arms crossed over her chest, guarding the exit like a prison warden in silk. Dr. Aris stood in the shadow of a bookshelf, his eyes fixed on me with a clinical detachment that made my skin crawl. He wasn't there to treat a patient, he was there to certify a victim. I let my body sag into the chair, allowing my shoulders to round and my mouth to hang slightly open. I stared blankly at the floral centerpiece on the table, letting my eyes glaze over, as if I were struggling to comprehend where I was. Dad Brandon said, his voice tight with a forced casualness. We just have a little bit of housekeeping to do before the party really starts. You know how the lawyers are. They want everything signed and sealed before we announce the gift. He placed a thick leather-bound folder on the table in front of me. It slid across the polished wood with a soft hiss. He opened it, revealing a stack of documents on heavy cream-colored paper. This is for the apartment, he said, tapping the top page. The deed transfer, the tax forms. We just need your signature here, here, and here. Then it is done. The penthouse is ours, and you can relax. I looked down at the papers. My vision was perfect, but I squinted, leaning forward until my nose was almost touching the page. I saw the deed transfer. It was standard. But Brandon's hand was resting on the bottom half of the document, holding it down. It was a subtle move, a magician's trick to direct the eye. I reached out with a trembling hand and clumsy fingers trying to turn the page. Oops, I mumbled. Sticky fingers. I managed to push the top sheet aside. Underneath it was not a tax form. It was a document titled, Durable Power of Attorney for Healthcare and Finances, effective immediately. And beneath that, a voluntary consent form for admission to the Greenwood Psychiatric Facility. The blood roared in my ears. They weren't just stealing the apartment. They were stealing me. This was the death warrant. If I signed this, I would cease to be Garrison Ford, the man, and become Garrison Ford, the ward of the state. I would be locked away, medicated into oblivion, while they liquidated 50 years of my hard work. I felt a surge of rage, so pure and hot, I thought it might burn through my act, but I forced it down. I pushed it into my legs, into my toes. I looked up at Brandon. He was sweating. Tiny beads of perspiration had gathered on his upper lip. He knew what was in there. He knew he was handing his father a loaded gun and asking him to pull the trigger. It is so much paperwork, I said, my voice cracking. I don't understand all these words, son. What does durable mean? It just means it lasts, Dad. Brandon said quickly, his patience fraying. It means we can take care of the apartment even if you are tired. It is standard. Just sign it. He uncapped a heavy Mont Blanc pen and thrust it into my hand. The pen felt cold and slick. It was my pen. I had given it to him for his college graduation. The irony was almost poetic. He was using my own gift to write my end. Valerie stepped away from the door. Her heels clicked sharply on the hardwood floor. Hurry up, Garrison, she snapped. The guests are waiting. The cake is waiting. Just sign the damn paper so we can go celebrate. Her mask was slipping. The greed was leaking out. I gripped the pen. I let my hand spasm. I jerked my arm violently to the right, feigning a neurological tic. The pen flew from my fingers. It skittered across the table and rolled off the edge, hitting the floor with a hollow clatter. Oh no, I cried out, my voice rising in a pitch of pathetic distress. My hands. I can't hold it. I dropped it. I started to push myself out of the chair, groaning, as if the effort was agonizing. I will get it. We'll get it, I muttered. Sit down, Dad. Brandon hissed, reaching for me. I will get it. No, I insist, I said, sliding off the chair before he could stop me. I dropped to my knees. The floor was hard against my old joints. I crawled under the table. For a brief moment, I was hidden from their view by the heavy tablecloth. This was it. The moment of action. I reached into the hidden pocket of my tuxedo jacket and pulled out a small black disc no larger than a quarter. It was a high-frequency listening device capable of transmitting audio up to a mile away. I peeled the adhesive backing off. My hand, which had been shaking violently seconds ago, was now steady as a surgeon's. I pressed the device firmly against the underside of the heavy table right in the center, where it would catch every whisper, every confession, every plot. Got it, I said, my voice muffled by the tablecloth. I grabbed the pen from the carpet. I took a deep breath, composing my face back into the mask of the senile fool. I hauled myself up using the table for support, knocking the folder askew as I rose. I am sorry, I wheezed, clutching the pen to my chest. I am so clumsy today. My head is spinning. Brandon grabbed the folder and straightened it aggressively. He shoved it back in front of me. It is fine, Dad. Just sign. Right here. He pointed to the signature line on the power of attorney document. He didn't even bother to hide the title anymore. He just wanted the ink on the page. I looked at the line. I brought the pen down. The tip hovered millimeters from the paper. I saw Dr. Aris take a step forward, his hand going to his pocket again. If I signed this, I was dead. If I refused outright, they might use force right here in the room. I needed a third option. I needed to delay. I can't, I said, dropping the pen onto the paper. What do you mean you can't? Brandon snarled. I am shaking too much, son. Look, I held up my hands. I vibrated them with such intensity that my cufflinks rattled. I need food, my blood sugar. I feel faint. If I sign now, it will look like a scribble. The bank won't take it. You know how they are. I looked up at him with wide, pleading eyes. Let me eat some cake, Brandon. Just a piece of cake. It will settle my nerves. Then I will sign. I promise. I want to give you the gift properly. On stage. In front of everyone. Brandon looked like he wanted to strangle me. He looked at Valerie. She looked furious. We don't have time for this, she hissed. Just make him do it. Brandon looked at Dr. Aris. The doctor shook his head slightly. If he is hypoglycemic or having a panic attack, the sedative might interact poorly. He said, his voice low and devoid of emotion. If he passes out before he signs, the signature is contestable. Let him eat. Let him calm down. We have all night. Brandon slammed his hand on the table. The sound echoed in the small room. Fine, he spat. Fine. We will go cut the cake. You eat. You calm down. But the second we are off that stage, you are coming back here and you are signing these papers. Do you understand me? I nodded vigorously. Yes, son, yes. Anything you say. I just want you to be happy. Valerie grabbed the folder and shoved it into her oversized designer clutch. She glared at me with eyes that promised retribution. You are ruining my schedule, Garrison, she whispered. Do not embarrass us out there. I struggled to my feet, leaning heavily on the table. I won't, I said. I am just so happy to be here. Brandon grabbed my arm again, roughly pulling me toward the door. Let's go and fix your tie. You look like a mess. We walked out of the private room. As the door clicked shut behind us, I felt a surge of adrenaline that was sharper and more potent than any drug. They had swallowed the bait. They thought they had simply delayed the execution by an hour. They didn't know that under that mahogany table, a tiny black ear was listening, waiting to broadcast their sins to the world. And they didn't know that the man stumbling beside them wasn't looking for a piece of cake. He was looking for the detonator. The corridor leading back to the ballroom was lined with mirrors, and for a brief second, I caught a glimpse of myself. I looked disheveled. My tie was crooked, my hair was mussed, and my posture was that of a man defeated by time. It was a perfect disguise. Brandon was gripping my elbow with enough force to bruise, steering me like a broken shopping cart. But we didn't make it 5 steps before Dr. Aris stepped into our path, blocking the hallway with his bulky frame. Wait, the doctor said, his voice low and raspy. I need to check him before he goes out there. If he passes out on the stage before the speech, it ruins the narrative. We need him confused, not comatose. Brandon stopped abruptly, almost causing me to trip. Make it quick, he snapped, checking his watch. We are 5 minutes behind schedule. Dr. Aris grabbed my face with a clammy hand, tilting my chin up toward the sconce light on the wall. He pulled a small pen light from his pocket and flashed it directly into my eyes. It was blinding and intrusive. I resisted the urge to slap his hand away. Instead, I let my eyes roll back slightly, forcing them to unfocus. I let my jaw go slack. Look at that dilation, Aris muttered, peering into my pupils. The scopolamine is hitting hard. He is wide open. Suggestible. He dropped his hand to my wrist, pressing his thumb against my pulse point. I held my breath. I tightened my abdominal muscles, forcing my blood pressure to spike just for a moment. It was a trick I learned from a deep-sea diver I met in the Maldives years ago. Control the breath, control the heart. His pulse is erratic. Aris noted a cruel smile touching his lips. Skipping beats. The stress combined with the sedatives is overloading his system. He is perfect, Brandon. He is a walking time bomb. Just make sure you get the microphone in his hand before he crashes. You have maybe 20 minutes of lucidity left before the gibberish starts. I am not, I mumbled, letting my head loll to the side. I am not crazy, I just want the cake. Aris chuckled. It was a dark, wet sound. Of course you do, Garrison. You will get your cake. And then a nice long nap. Valerie, who had been tapping her foot impatiently, suddenly snapped her clutch purse shut. The sound was like a gunshot in the narrow hall. You two handle him, she said, smoothing the silk of her dress. I need to fix my makeup. He slobbered on me when he stumbled earlier. It is disgusting. She turned and headed toward the ladies' lounge, which was situated just around the corner. Hurry up, Brandon called after her. We need to walk in together. I will be 2 minutes, she shouted back without turning around. Brandon sighed and leaned me against the wall as if I were a bag of golf clubs. Stay here, Dad. Don't move. He turned to whisper something to Dr. Aris, probably confirming the dosage for the injection they planned to give me publicly. It was the moment I had been waiting for. I raised my left hand, slowly trembling, as if I were trying to scratch my ear. I adjusted the small, flesh-colored device sitting in my ear canal. To Brandon and the world, it was a hearing aid, a symbol of my decline. In reality, it was a high-fidelity receiver linked directly to the bug I had slipped into Valerie's purse when I hugged her in the lobby 20 minutes ago. I pressed the volume button. The static cleared instantly, replaced by the sound of a heavy door closing and the click of high heels on tile. I heard the rustle of fabric as she set her purse on the vanity counter. Then the distinct tone of a phone dialing. I stared at the wallpaper pattern in the hallway, my face blank and vacant, but my mind was laser-focused on the voice buzzing in my ear. Pick up, pick up, pick up, Valerie hissed. The call connected. Liam, it's me. No, I can't talk long. The old man is being difficult. He is clinging to consciousness like a cockroach. I heard a male voice on the other end, muffled but audible. It was Liam, the personal trainer, the real father of the child. Did he sign? Liam asked. Not yet, Valerie spat. He dropped the pen. He wanted cake. Can you believe it? He is like a toddler. But don't worry. Brandon is marching him onto the stage right now. We are going to do the announcement, then drag him back and force the signature. Dr. Aris said he won't even know what he is writing in half an hour. I watched Brandon talking to Aris 10 feet away. My son looked stressed, wiping sweat from his forehead. He had no idea his wife was currently plotting the endgame with her lover. Is the facility ready? Valerie asked, her voice echoing slightly in the tiled bathroom. Yes, Liam replied. I spoke to the director. The van is parked at the loading dock. As soon as Aris sedates him, they will wheel him out the back. Good, Valerie said. I am so sick of this act, Liam. You should see him. Drooling, shaking. He smells like old money and decay. I just want him gone. 2 more hours, Liam. Just 2 more hours and the old man will be rotting in a padded room in the Berkshires, and the money is ours. All of it. I felt a coldness spread through my chest that had nothing to do with the air conditioning. It wasn't sadness. It wasn't fear. It was the absolute zero of total emotional detachment. The woman I had welcomed into my home, the woman carrying a child she tried to pass off as my heir, had just confirmed my death sentence while checking her lipstick. And Brandon, Liam asked. Valerie laughed. It was a harsh, ugly sound. Brandon is a useful idiot. Once Garrison is put away, I will deal with Brandon. He is weak. He will do whatever I say. If he gets annoying, well, accidents happen. We will have the power of attorney. We won't need him for long. I stood there leaning against the wall, listening to the future they had planned for me. A future where I was a prisoner in my own mind, locked away in an institution, while they carved up my empire like vultures on a carcass. Okay, I have to go, Valerie said. They are waiting. I love you. We are almost rich, baby." She hung up. I heard the rustle of the purse being picked up. I lowered my hand from my ear. The static returned, but the words were branded into my brain. Rotting in the facility. Useful idiot. Accidents happen. Brandon turned back to me. He put on his concerned son face. "Ready, Dad?" he asked, reaching for my arm. "Valerie is coming. It is showtime." I looked at him. Really looked at him. I saw the weakness Valerie despised. I saw the greed that had blinded him to the snake in his bed. For a split second, I almost pitied him. He was walking into the slaughterhouse right beside me, and he didn't even know he was on the menu. "I am ready, son," I whispered. My voice was steady just for a second before I remembered to add the tremor. I want to give you your gift." Valerie rounded the corner. She had reapplied her lipstick. It was a bright, violent red. She smiled at me. "There is my favorite father-in-law," she said, hooking her arm through mine again. "Let's go get you that cake, Garrison." We walked toward the ballroom doors. The music grew louder. The chatter of the guests swelled. They thought they were leading a lamb to the sacrifice. They didn't know I had just heard the confession that would hang them both. I wasn't stumbling anymore. Not on the inside. Inside, I was marching. I was marching toward that microphone, and I was bringing hell with me. The ballroom lights dimmed, shifting from a warm amber to a dramatic spotlight that cut through the darkness and focused entirely on the altar. The space had been transformed into a cathedral of excess. Thousands of white roses cascaded from the ceiling, suspended on invisible wires like frozen rain. A string quartet began to play a melody that was so achingly beautiful it felt like a physical insult. I sat at the table closest to the stage, the seat of honor they had reserved for me not out of respect, but out of strategic necessity. They needed me front and center. They needed the prop visible for the final act. I looked around the room. The guests were enraptured. They saw a fairy tale unfolding before their eyes. They saw the handsome son of a real estate tycoon marrying the beautiful, devoted woman who had saved him. They saw the wealth, the glamour, the promise of a dynasty continuing. They did not see the invisible wires tightening around my neck. They did not see the doctor standing in the shadows, his hand resting casually near the pocket that held the chemical restraint. They did not see the security team I had planted disguised as waiters and tech crew waiting for my command to tear the roof off this place. Brandon stood at the altar looking solemn and dignified. He adjusted his cufflinks, the diamond ones I had given him for his 30th birthday. He looked at me for a fleeting second. His expression was a masterpiece of rehearsed concern. He gave me a small, sad smile, the kind you give to a child who doesn't understand what is happening. It was a look that said, "Don't worry, Dad, it will all be over soon." He had no idea how right he was. Valerie took the microphone. Her hand trembled perfectly. She wiped a single tear from her cheek, ensuring it didn't smudge her mascara. She looked radiant. She looked angelic. She looked like a viper that had just shed its skin. She turned to Brandon and spoke of love and partnership and destiny. The crowd sighed. A few aunts dabbed at their eyes with handkerchiefs. It was nauseatingly perfect. Then she turned. She didn't turn to the audience. She turned slightly toward me. The spotlight widened just enough to include my table in its halo. I was suddenly part of the performance. I was the tragic figure in her play. "And to you, Garrison," she said, her voice breaking with emotion. "To the man who raised the love of my life, I want to make a vow to you as well." The room went deadly silent, all eyes fixed on the frail, trembling old man clutching his champagne flute with both hands. I let my head bob. I let my mouth hang open slightly. I played the part. But under the table, my legs were tensed like steel springs. "I know these last few months have been hard," she continued, her voice soft and full of sorrow. I know the confusion comes and goes. I know the darkness sometimes takes you away from us. But I want you to know that you will never be alone." She paused for effect. She looked at Brandon, who nodded bravely, fighting back his own fake tears. "I vow to be your daughter," she said. "I vow to be your memory when yours fails. I vow to guide you through the twilight years that are coming, even when you don't recognize us, even when the days are mixed up, even when you are scared and confused. I will be there. We will make the hard decisions for you so you don't have to. We will protect you even from yourself." The audacity was breathtaking. She was standing there in a $40,000 dress paid for by my sweat, and she was publicly declaring me incompetent. She was framing my imprisonment as an act of charity. She was telling 200 witnesses that stripping me of my rights was a mercy. The crowd ate it up. I heard the murmurs of approval. What a saint. So difficult to care for a parent with dementia. She is so brave. They were validating the narrative. They were becoming unwitting accomplices to the crime. If I screamed now, if I stood up and accused her, they would just see a confused old man lashing out. They would see exactly what she wanted them to see. I looked at her. I saw the glint of triumph in her eyes. She thought she had won. She thought the old lion was toothless. She was talking about caring for me while 20 minutes ago in the bathroom, she had called me disgusting and wished for my death. The cognitive dissonance made my vision blur. The rage started in my stomach cold and heavy and rose up my throat like bile. I looked at the champagne flute in my hand. It was fine, crystal delicate, and expensive. I watched the bubbles rising to the surface, endlessly rushing to pop. My fingers tightened around the stem. I imagined it was Brandon's neck. I imagined it was the pen Dr. Aris held. I imagined it was the lies they had been feeding me for months. "I vow to keep you safe," Valerie said, her voice soaring to a crescendo. "To ensure you are in a place where you can be looked after 24 hours a day. To manage the burden of your legacy so you can finally rest." Rest. That was the code word. Rest meant silence. Rest meant the facility. Rest meant death. My grip tightened. The rage demanded a physical outlet. I couldn't scream. I couldn't strike. I had to stay in character. I had to be the feeble old man for just 1 hour more. But the energy had to go somewhere. Snap. The sound was sharp and sudden, like a gunshot was shot in a library. The crystal stem shattered in my grip. The bowl of the glass sheared off, slicing into the palm of my hand. Champagne exploded outward, soaking the white tablecloth. A shard of glass dug deep into the meat of my thumb, severing the skin. Blood, bright red and undeniable, mixed with the golden wine spreading across the linen, like a Rorschach test of my fury. The guests at the nearby tables gasped. A waiter rushed forward with a napkin. "Oh my God!" Valerie cried out, her hand flying to her mouth. "See, he's hurt himself. He doesn't know his own strength." She twisted the knife instantly. She turned my moment of rage into proof of my decline. Brandon jumped off the altar and ran toward me. He wasn't running to help his father. He was running to manage the asset. "Dad," he shouted, grabbing my wrist. "Let go. You're cutting yourself." I looked down at my hand. The blood was flowing freely now, dripping onto my tuxedo pants. It stung, a sharp, clarifying pain. It grounded me. It reminded me that I was alive, that I was flesh and blood, that I was real. I let the shattered remains of the glass fall from my hand. I looked up at Brandon. His face was inches from mine. I saw the panic in his eyes. He wasn't worried about the cut. He was worried the blood would stain the carpet. I am sorry," I stammered, forcing my voice to tremble. I wanted to toast. It broke. Why did it break? Dr. Aris appeared out of nowhere, pushing the waiter aside. "Let me see," he demanded, grabbing my hand roughly. He inspected the cut. He didn't look at me with compassion. He looked at me with calculation. "It is superficial," he announced to the room, his voice projecting authority. "Just a scratch. His motor control is slipping. This happens." He pulled a gauze pad from his pocket. Why did he have medical supplies in a tuxedo pocket, unless he was planning for this, and pressed it against my palm? "Pressure," he whispered to me, his breath smelling of mints and decay. "Hold it tight, Garrison. We don't want a scene. Not yet." I looked at him. I looked at Brandon. I looked at Valerie standing on the altar, looking down at me like a benevolent goddess. I held the gauze. I let my head drop. I let my shoulders shake. To them, it looked like I was sobbing in shame. To the room, it looked like a senile man, humiliated by his own frailty. But I wasn't crying. I was laughing. A silent, dark, internal laughter that shook my ribcage, because the blood on my hand was a contract. It was a promise. They had drawn first blood, but I would draw the last. Valerie sighed into the microphone, a sound of long-suffering patience. "See, everyone," she said softly. "This is why we need to act. This is why we need to take care of him. We love you, Garrison. We've got you." The crowd applauded again, softly, respectfully. A slow clap for the tragedy of aging. Brandon patted my shoulder. His hand was heavy. "Sit tight, Dad," he whispered. "Dr. Aris will bandage that up. Then we cut the cake. Then you sign. No more accidents." He walked back to the altar. He took Valerie's hand. They kissed. The crowd cheered. The music swelled. I sat there clutching my bleeding hand, my eyes fixed on the happy couple. The pain in my palm was a beacon. It focused me. The time for acting was almost over. The time for the shark was coming. I looked at my watch. 20 minutes. 20 minutes until the speeches. 20 minutes until I stood up and burned their world to the ground. I signaled the waiter with my uninjured hand. "Water," I rasped. He poured me a glass. I took a sip. I used the water to wash the taste of bile from my mouth. I needed to be clear. I needed to be precise. I looked at the blood soaking through the gauze. It was a deep red, the color of anger, the color of life. "You want to take care of me," I thought, looking at Valerie's triumphant smile. "You want to manage my legacy. I will give you a legacy, Valerie. I will give you a legacy that will follow you to your prison cell." I sat back. I waited. And under the table, my foot began to tap a rhythm. Not a tremor. A march. A war drum beating only for me. The waiter cleared the broken glass from the table with the discretion of a crime scene cleaner wiping away evidence. He placed a fresh napkin over the bloodstain on the tablecloth, but the red mark remained visible, a stark reminder of the violence simmering beneath the surface of this black tie affair. I wrapped my hand tightly in the gauze Dr. Aris had provided, feeling the throb of the cut pulse in time with the music. It was a grounding sensation. Pain is truth. Everything else in this room was a lie. The lights shifted again. The ambient chatter died down as the spotlight swung back to the stage where Brandon stood alone. He held the microphone with both hands. His head bowed slightly, as if the weight of the moment was too much for him to bear. It was a posture I recognized. He used the same body language when he came to my office to ask for money to cover his gambling debts, or to explain why a business venture I had funded had failed. It was the pose of the penitent son. The crowd ate it up. They leaned forward, their faces soft with sympathy, ready to drink in the tragedy he was about to pour. "Ladies and gentlemen," Brandon began, his voice trembling just enough to sound authentic. "Thank you for being here to celebrate our love. Valerie and I are so blessed. But as many of you know, happiness often walks hand in hand with sorrow." He paused, looking out over the audience. He didn't look at me. Not yet. He was building the narrative brick by brick. I have always looked up to my father, he continued. Garrison Ford is a titan, a legend in this city. He taught me everything I know about strength and resilience, which is why it destroys me. Absolutely destroys me. To share what we have been going through privately as a family. A hush fell over the room. You could hear the ice melting in the buckets. My father is not well, Brandon said, his voice dropping to a harsh whisper. For the past few months, we have watched the man we love fade away. The doctors call it rapid onset dementia with aggressive episodes. I call it losing my best friend. A woman at the next table gasped and covered her mouth. I saw the pity in her eyes as she looked at me. To her, I was a shell, a tragedy. She didn't see a man being slandered, she saw a medical diagnosis in a tuxedo. Brandon finally looked at me. His eyes were wet with fake tears, but behind the water I saw the calculation. He was waiting. He was waiting for the drugs to kick in. By now, according to Dr. Aris's timetable, the massive dose of haloperidol and scopolamine they thought I had ingested should be tearing through my nervous system. I should be slurring. My muscles should be spasming. I should be screaming at invisible demons or drooling onto my shirt. He was waiting for the monster to appear so he could be the hero who contained it. Tonight, Brandon said, his voice gaining strength, tonight was supposed to be a celebration. But Dad doesn't always know where he is. He gets confused. He gets scared. And sometimes he gets violent. He gestured to my bandaged hand. You saw the glass, he said sadly. It is just a symptom of a brilliant mind betraying itself. Dr. Aris stepped out from the shadows near the service entrance. He wasn't alone. 2 men in white orderly uniforms stood behind him. They were thick-necked, broad-shouldered men who looked more like nightclub bouncers than medical professionals. They weren't there to check my pulse. They were there to drag a body. I sat perfectly still. I didn't shake. I didn't drool. I didn't scream. I simply stared at my son. I locked my eyes onto his and I poured 40-year course of disappointment and cold fury into that gaze. I stopped the feigned tremor in my hand. I sat up straight, my spine aligning against the back of the chair. I crossed my legs. I picked up my water glass with my uninjured hand and took a slow, deliberate sip. Brandon's speech faltered. He was expecting chaos. He was expecting a scene that would justify the conservatorship papers hidden in his jacket. Instead, he was getting silence. He was getting a father who looked sharper and more dangerous than he had in a decade. He needs our support, Brandon stammered, losing his rhythm. He looked at Valerie. She was standing at the edge of the stage, her smile frozen in a rictus of panic. She tapped her wrist discreetly, signaling the time. Why isn't he falling apart? Why isn't he crazy? I saw Dr. Aris frown. He checked his watch. He looked at me. He saw the clarity in my eyes. He saw the lack of dilation in my pupils. The realization hit him like a physical blow. The drugs weren't working. Either the dosage was wrong or I hadn't taken them. Panic is a dangerous thing. It makes smart men stupid and stupid men reckless. Aris knew that if I walked out of this room lucid and angry, his medical license and his freedom were forfeit. He had to force the narrative. If the drugs wouldn't provide the show, he would have to manufacture it. He snapped his fingers at the 2 orderlies. He pointed at me. He is having an episode! Aris shouted, his voice cutting through the silent ballroom. The guests turned in shock. I wasn't doing anything. I was just sitting there. But the power of suggestion is a terrifying weapon. When a doctor in a suit yells that a man is sick, people believe him. He is seizing, Aris yelled, running toward my table. It is a silent seizure. He is going into catatonic shock. Get him! It was a lie so bold it was almost admirable. He was gaslighting 200 people in real time. The 2 orderlies lunged forward. They moved with professional speed. They weren't coming to help me. They were coming to restrain me. They were coming to inject me. I saw the glint of a syringe in one of their hands. If that needle touched me, it was game over. I would wake up in a padded room if I woke up at all. Brandon was shouting into the microphone now, his voice shrill. "Please, everyone, stay back. Give him space. It is happening again." Oh, God. Dad. Hold on. The guests recoiled, pushing their chairs back, creating a circle of empty space around my table. A gladiatorial arena. The first orderly reached me. He grabbed my shoulder, his grip like a vice. "Easy, sir," he grunted. "Just relax. We are going to take you to the back." I didn't relax. I didn't struggle like a confused old man. I reacted like a combatant. I stood up. I moved with a speed that surprised him. I grabbed his wrist, the one digging into my shoulder, and I twisted it outward, applying pressure to the joint. It was a simple move I had learned in a self-defense course I took after a kidnapping threat in the 80s. The orderly yelped in surprise and pain, his grip loosening. I shoved him back. He stumbled into the table, knocking over a centerpiece. Water and flowers crashed to the floor. "Don't touch me," I roared. My voice wasn't raspy anymore. It was a thunderclap. It filled the room, echoing off the high ceilings. The second orderly hesitated. He looked at Aris. This wasn't in the script. The script said, "I would be a weeping mess, not a fighting bull." "Restrain him," Aris screamed, his face pale and sweaty. "He is violent. He is a danger to himself." "Inject him now," Brandon jumped off the stage. He was running toward me, but he wasn't running to save me from the men attacking me. He was running to help them. He looked desperate. "Dad, stop," he yelled. "Let them help you. You don't know what you are doing." The guests were screaming now. It was chaos. Perfect chaos. I backed away, kicking my chair toward the second orderly to create distance. I wasn't trying to win a fistfight. I just needed space. I needed 3 seconds to get to the stage. "I am not sick," I shouted, turning to face the crowd. My eyes swept over the terrified faces of my peers. "Look at me. Do I look confused? Do I look like I am dying?" Valerie grabbed the microphone, her voice piercing through the noise. "It is the psychosis," she shrieked. "He thinks we are enemies. Grab him before he hurts someone." The second orderly dodged the chair and lunged for my legs. He tackled me around the waist. We hit the floor hard. My breath left me in a rush. I felt a sharp pain in my hip, but I ignored it. I felt his hands groping for my arms, trying to pin me, trying to expose a vein for the needle. Dr. Aris was right there, hovering over me, the syringe uncapped, a clear liquid beading at the tip. "Hold him still," Aris hissed. "Just 1 second. Just 1 second, and he is gone." I saw the needle coming down. It was aimed at my neck. I brought my knee up, slamming it into the orderly's chest. He grunted and loosened his grip just enough. I rolled to the side. The needle missed my jugular by an inch and buried itself in the thick carpet. I scrambled back, pushing myself up against the stage. I was panting. My tuxedo was torn. I was bleeding from my hand. I looked like a madman, but I had the high ground. I reached into my pocket, not for a weapon, but for the remote control to the projector system. "You want to see crazy?" I yelled, breathless, my back against the wood of the stage. "You want to see a sick mind?" Brandon froze. Valerie froze. Aris froze, staring at the black device in my hand. I pointed the remote at the massive screen behind them, the screen that was currently displaying a photo of Brandon and me fishing when he was 12. "Let's watch a movie," I said, and I pressed play. The second orderly's hand clamped onto my shoulder, heavy and suffocating like a wet sandbag. I could smell the stale coffee on his breath and see the needle in Dr. Aris's hand gleaming under the chandeliers, ready to plunge into my neck. They expected resistance. They expected the frantic flailing of a confused geriatric fighting against hallucinations. They expected a victim. What they got was a statue coming to life. I didn't pull away. I didn't scream for help. I simply stopped shaking. The tremor in my hands, which I had maintained for 4 exhausting hours, vanished instantly. My spine straightened. My chin lifted. The fog I had painted over my eyes evaporated, leaving a gaze as cold and hard as a diamond cutter. I grabbed the orderly's wrist, not with the desperate clawing of a frightened patient, but with the iron grip of a man who still chopped his own firewood at the cabin every winter. I squeezed. I felt the tendons in his arm shift and grind. His eyes went wide with shock. "Get your hands off me," I said. My voice wasn't loud. It didn't need to be. It was a low, resonant growl that carried the weight of 50 years of boardroom dominance. It was the voice that had silenced union riots and hostile takeovers. It cut through the chaotic noise of the ballroom like a razor blade through silk. The orderly flinched. He looked at Dr. Aris, confused. The script said I was supposed to be weak. The script said I was supposed to be crying. Dr. Aris hesitated, the syringe hovering in midair. He looked at my face, and for the first time he saw the shark swimming just beneath the surface. "Inject him," Aris hissed, though his voice wavered. "Do it now before he hurts someone." The orderly tightened his grip again, trying to force me down. I shoved him. It wasn't a push. It was a check. I put my weight into his chest and sent him stumbling backward into a waiter carrying a tray of champagne flutes. The crash of breaking glass was spectacular. The music stopped. The guests gasped into silence. I stood there in the center of the wreckage, smoothing the lapels of my tuxedo. I brushed an invisible speck of dust from my shoulder. I looked at Brandon. He was standing at the edge of the stage, his face a mask of pure panic. He looked like a director whose lead actor had just gone off script on opening night. "Dad," he whispered. I didn't answer him immediately. I reached into my inner jacket pocket. Dr. Aris lunged forward. "He has a weapon." "Security!" Valerie shrieked, pointing a manicured finger at me. "He has a gun. I didn't pull out a gun." I pulled out a piece of brass. I held it up high, catching the beam of the spotlight. It was an old-fashioned, heavy brass key with an intricate head. It wasn't electronic. It wasn't a key card. It was a statement. "Wait," I boomed. The word echoed off the vaulted ceiling. "Wait, before you drag me away to the asylum, before you declare me unfit, before you erase 50 years of my legacy. I have one piece of unfinished business." I turned the key in the light. It glittered seductively. "This," I said, my voice steady and clear, "is the key to the penthouse at 444 Beacon Street. The entire top floor. 3,000 square feet. Private elevator. Wraparound terrace overlooking the Charles River. Market value $950,000. Paid in full. Paid in tension." This morning, I saw the change happen instantly. It was visceral. Brandon's eyes locked onto the key. His pupils dilated. His breath hitched. The panic on his face was replaced by a hunger so raw it was almost pornographic. Valerie stopped screaming. She licked her lips. Her hand dropped from her chest. She took a step forward, her eyes fixed on the brass object in my hand, like a moth drawn to a bug zapper. I watched them. I watched the greed override their survival instinct. I watched the avarice short-circuit their plan. They were supposed to be neutralizing a threat, but now they were staring at the prize. They were gamblers who had just seen the pot triple in size. Dr. Aris didn't care about the key. He cared about his license. He cared about the prison sentence waiting for him if I started talking. He moved toward me again, the needle raised. "Mr. Ford, please, we need to calm you down. Stop," Brandon shouted. It was a command. He held up his hand, palm out toward the doctor. "Stop, Aris. Don't touch him." "Brandon, wait." Aris hissed urgency bleeding into his tone. "He is lucid. We are losing the window." I said, "Wait," Brandon snapped. He didn't look at the doctor. He couldn't take his eyes off the key. He walked down the steps of the stage, He moved slowly, cautiously, as if approaching a wild animal that was holding a bag of gold. "Dad," he said softly. His voice was trembling, but not with concern anymore, with anticipation. Is that for us?" I smiled. It was a shark's smile. "It was supposed to be," I said. "It was my wedding gift. A nest egg. A place for you to raise your family. A place where you wouldn't have to worry about rent or landlords or me." I took a step toward him. The orderlies backed away, unsure of what to do now that their paymaster had changed the orders. "I bought it cash," I continued, lowering my voice to a conversational tone, drawing him in. "I furnished it. I even put a nursery in the south wing. For the grandchild." Valerie let out a small, choked sound. She walked up behind Brandon, peering over his shoulder. "The south wing," she whispered. "The one with the river view." "The very same," I said. I tossed the key gently in the air and caught it. The metallic clink was the only sound in the room. "But now," I said, looking around at the shattered glass and the terrified guests. "Now I am confused. Dr. Aris says I am sick. He says I am dangerous. He says I need to go away." I looked at Brandon. I tilted my head. "If I am crazy, son, if I am mentally incompetent, then this gift is void. A crazy man can't sign a deed. A crazy man can't transfer property. If I go to the hospital tonight, this key goes into evidence. And the penthouse sits empty. For years. While the lawyers fight over my bones." I let the words hang there. I let the logic sink in. I was giving him a choice. A binary choice. He could have his revenge or he could have his reward. He couldn't have both. If he committed me now, he lost the apartment. If he wanted the apartment, he had to admit I was sane. Brandon licked his lips. I could see the gears turning in his head. He was doing the math. He figured he could take the key, now get the deed signed, and then commit me next week. He thought he could outsmart me. He thought he could have it all. Greed is a leash, and I was holding the handle. "It's okay, Dad." Brandon said, his voice soothing. "You aren't crazy. You are just stressed." Dr. Aris was overreacting. "Right, doctor." He shot a glare at Aris. A glare that said, "Shut up and play along or you don't get paid." Aris lowered the syringe slowly, his face a mask of frustration and fear. He knew this was a mistake. He knew they were walking into a trap. But he was just the hired help. "Right," Aris muttered, stepping back into the shadows. "Just stress." Brandon smiled at me. He held out his hand, palm up. "Give me the key, Dad. Let's get you some water. We can sign the papers right here. Then you can go home. To your bed. No hospitals. I promise." Valerie nodded beside him, her eyes shining. "Yes, Garrison," she said. "Just give it to Brandon. We will take care of everything. The apartment sounds perfect." I looked at his hand. I looked at the key. I had them. They had paused the attack. They had called off the dogs. They had lowered their shields because they wanted the shiny object. They had forgotten rule number 1 of the jungle: never take your eyes off the predator. I stepped closer. I was close enough to smell his cologne, close enough to see the sweat on his brow. "You want it?" I asked softly. "Yes, Dad," Brandon breathed. "Please." I reached out. I held the key over his open palm. He reached for it, his fingers twitching. But I didn't drop it. Instead, I closed my fist around it. I pulled my hand back. "I have one problem, though," I said, my voice hardening. What Brandon asked, his eyes snapping up to mine. I turned away from him. I walked back toward the stage. I didn't run. I walked. I walked past the orderlies who stepped aside to let me pass. I walked past the stunned guests. I walked up the stairs to the altar, where the laptop connected to the projector sat humming. "The problem," I said, speaking into the lapel microphone that was still clipped to my jacket, live and hot, "is that I don't think you deserve it." I turned to face them from the high ground. "I think you deserve something else entirely." Brandon's face fell. Confusion replaced the greed. "Dad, what are you doing?" I reached into my pocket again. Not for the key this time, but for the small black flash drive I had prepared with Fiona. I plugged it into the laptop. The screen flickered. "I think," I said, my finger hovering over the enter key. "I think it is time we all watched a little home movie." Brandon took a step forward. "No. Don't." But it was too late. I pressed the key, and the truth exploded onto the screen. I looked down at the sleek silver laptop resting on the podium. It was a piece of technology I had bought for the wedding planner, but tonight it was an instrument of war. My finger hovered over the spacebar. The room was so quiet I could hear the hum of the cooling fan inside the machine and the ragged breathing of my son standing 10 feet away. He looked like a man who had just stepped off a ledge and was waiting to hit the ground. "You know," I said, my voice calm and conversational, amplified by the speakers to reach every corner of the ballroom. "Tradition dictates that the father of the groom presents a montage, a collection of happy memories. Baby steps, graduation photos, fishing trips." I looked up at the crowd. 200 faces stared back at me. They were confused. They were frightened. They sensed the violence in the air, but they couldn't look away. "I spent all night working on this," I continued, looking directly at Valerie. She was trembling, her hands clutching her stomach in a protective gesture that I now knew was a sham. I wanted to capture the real essence of this family. The truth behind the smiles. The moments you don't see on Instagram. Brandon took a step toward the stage. His hand was outstretched. "Dad, please," he whispered, his voice cracking. "Don't do this. Whatever it is, we can talk." "We are done talking, son," I said. "Now we listen." I pressed the spacebar. The giant screen behind me flickered to life. The projection was massive, 20 feet high, dominating the room. It wasn't a grainy old home video. It was high-definition footage, crisp and bright, recorded only 24 hours ago. The angle was low, looking up from beneath a coffee table. It was the camera I had planted in my own study the night before when Brandon had come over to finalize the seating chart. I knew they would use the room as a command center the moment I went to bed. On the screen, my study appeared. The mahogany bookshelves, the leather chairs. And sitting in those chairs, drinking my 50-year-old scotch, were Brandon, Valerie, and Dr. Eris. The audio boomed through the ballroom sound system, perfectly mixed, crystal clear. "To the future," Brandon's voice said on the screen. He raised a glass. "To the end of the Garrison era." The guests in the ballroom gasped. A woman in the front row dropped her purse. On the screen, Valerie laughed. She took a sip of the scotch and grimaced. "God, I hate this stuff," she said. "It tastes like dirt. As soon as he is committed, I am pouring the rest of this collection down the sink. We are turning this room into a gym." I watched the real Valerie standing on the dance floor. Her face had drained of all color. She looked like a ghost haunting her own wedding. She shook her head frantically, mouthing the word "no" over and over again. The video continued. Dr. Aris leaned forward, elbows on his knees. "We need to be precise about the timeline," the doctor said. "Once I administer the haloperidol at the reception, he is going to go down hard. We have maybe a 12-hour window before he wakes up. By then, he needs to be processed at the facility." "Don't worry," Brandon said on screen, swirling his drink. "I have the judge lined up for the emergency hearing Monday morning. We cite the violent outburst at the wedding. We show the medical report you faked. Boom. Temporary conservatorship. And the assets Valerie asked." When do we get access? Immediately. Brandon replied. I can liquidate the investment accounts on Tuesday. We pay off your debts, heiress. We pay off the house and then we party. The ballroom was frozen in horror. This wasn't just family drama. This was a conspiracy. This was a felony being plotted in 4K resolution. I saw the senator in the third row stand up and signal to his security detail. He was leaving. He knew a sinking ship when he saw one. But most of the guests were paralyzed. They were witnessing the social execution of the Ford heir, and they couldn't look away. On the screen, the conversation took a darker turn. What if he fights it? Dr. Harris asked. Garrison is tough. If he gets a lawyer, he won't, Valerie cut in her voice sharp and cold. Because you are going to up the dosage, Doc. You are going to keep him so drugged, he won't know what year it is. You said you could do it. I can, Aris said. But long-term high-dose antipsychotics on a man his age, it is risky. His heart might not take it. There was a silence in the video, a silence that stretched for 5 agonizing seconds. Then Brandon spoke. So. The word hung in the air. Simple. Brutal. So his heart gives out, Brandon said, shrugging. He is 70. It happens. Honestly, it would simplify things. In the ballroom, the real Brandon let out a sound that was half sob, half scream. He fell to his knees, his hands covering his ears as if he could block out the sound of his own soul being exposed. No, he wailed. That's not... I didn't mean it. But the video kept playing relentlessly. He is right, Valerie said on the screen. She leaned back, putting her feet up on my antique desk, her heels scratching the wood. The old man needs to die as soon as possible. The facility costs $20,000 a month. That cuts into our margin. If he has a heart attack in 6 months, well, tragedy strikes. We cry at the funeral. We inherit everything tax-free. 6 months, Dr. Harris mused. I can make that happen. A little digitalis in his drip. Looks like natural causes. Perfect, Brandon said. 6 months. I can play the grieving son for 6 months. The screen went black. The silence that followed was heavy physical. It pressed down on the room like a lead blanket. No one moved. No one breathed. The horror of what they had just heard was absolute. They had planned a murder. A slow medical murder, and they had discussed it over my scotch like they were planning a vacation. I looked down at Brandon. He was curled in a ball on the floor, sobbing into the carpet. He wasn't crying because he was sorry. He was crying because he was caught. I looked at Dr. Harris. He was backing away slowly toward the kitchen exit, his eyes darting around like a trapped rat. He knew his life was over. He knew he would never practice medicine again. He knew he was going to die in prison. And I looked at Valerie. She wasn't crying. She was standing rigid, her fists clenched at her sides. She was staring at me with a hatred so pure it was almost impressive. She knew the game was up. She knew the penthouse was gone. The money was gone. The reputation was gone. I leaned into the microphone. Happy wedding day, I said. My voice was flat, cold. You wanted a memory. You wanted something to remember this night by. There it is. That is who you are. That is what you are. I pointed a finger at Brandon. You aren't my son anymore. You are a bad investment, and I am liquidating my position. Valerie screamed. It was a primal sound of rage. She lunged toward the stage, her hands clawed, ready to tear my eyes out. Turn it off, she shrieked. You ruin everything. You selfish old bastard. You should have just died. She ran up the stairs, tripping on her dress, scrambling toward the laptop. She wanted to destroy the evidence. She wanted to smash the machine as if that would erase the truth from the minds of 200 witnesses. But she didn't make it. Fiona stepped out from the wings. She wasn't alone. She was flanked by 4 men in dark tactical gear. My private security, the Wolf Pack. They didn't hesitate. 2 of them intercepted Valerie, grabbing her arms before she could reach the podium. She thrashed and kicked, spitting at them like a wild animal. "Get off me, I am pregnant. You can't touch me." I watched her struggle. I watched the woman who had plotted my death use an unborn child as a shield. "Hold her," I commanded. The security guards locked her arms. She froze, panting, glaring at me. "You think you won," she hissed. "You think this changes anything? I am still carrying your grandchild, Garrison. You can't touch me. The courts will give me millions for child support. You will pay for this baby for the rest of your miserable life." I looked at her. I looked at her stomach. I shook my head slowly. "That is where you are wrong, Valerie," I said, reaching into my pocket for the second piece of evidence. I didn't just bring a video. I brought some reading material. I pulled out a folded stack of papers. The DNA results, the ones Liam had sent me. I held them up. "You see," I said, my voice carrying to the back of the room, "I had a long conversation with your personal trainer this morning. Liam. He sends his regards." Valerie's face went slack. The fight went out of her instantly. "And he sent me something else," I continued. "He sent me the results of the amniocentesis you had done last week. The one you paid for in cash so Brandon wouldn't see the credit card bill." I unfolded the paper. "It says here that the probability of Brandon being the father is 0.0%. I looked at Brandon, who had lifted his head from the floor. He looked at me, then he looked at Valerie. The betrayal in his eyes was the only genuine emotion I had seen from him all day. "Valerie," Brandon whispered. She didn't look at him. She kept her eyes on me. "It says here," I read loud enough for the back row to hear, "that the father is Liam Vance." I tossed the papers into the air. They fluttered down like confetti, landing on the stage, landing on Brandon, landing on the ruins of their life. "So you see," I said, "there is no grandchild, there is no heir, there is just you, Valerie, and a baby you tried to use as a bargaining chip." Brandon stood up slowly. He looked broken. He looked dangerous. He turned toward Valerie. His hands were shaking, not with fear this time, but with a rage that mirrored my own. "You told me it was mine," he said, his voice rising. "You swore on your mother's life." Valerie laughed. It was a desperate, unhinged sound. "You idiot," she spat. "Of course I lied. Look at you. You are weak. You are pathetic. You couldn't even kill your father right. I needed a man, Brandon. Liam is a man. You are just a wallet." Brandon roared. It was an animal sound. He lunged at her. The security guards moved fast, but Brandon was fueled by humiliation. He reached her before they could stop him. He raised his hand, but he never struck her. Because at that exact moment, the double doors at the back of the ballroom burst open. "Police, everybody down!" A team of uniformed officers poured into the room, guns drawn. Fiona had timed it perfectly. I stood on the stage, untouched, calm, watching the finale of my masterpiece. The sirens wailed outside. The red and blue lights flashed against the crystal chandeliers. It was over. The trap had snapped shut, and I was the only one left standing. The scream that tore from Valerie's throat was primal, a sound of pure, unadulterated panic that shattered the stunned silence of the ballroom. She did not look at her husband, who was currently curled on the floor like a broken child. She did not look at the guests who were watching the collapse of her dynasty with morbid fascination. She looked only at the laptop sitting innocently on the podium, the digital witness that was currently looping the video of her conspiracy. Her eyes were wide and feral, manic with the desperate need to silence the truth. She gathered the heavy silk of her wedding dress in her hands, bunching the $40,000 fabric like rags, and lunged toward the stairs. She moved with the speed of a cornered animal, abandoning all pretense of grace. She took the steps 2 at a time, her heels clacking violently against the wood. Her target was the machine. She wanted to smash it, to tear the cords from the wall, to stomp the screen until the pixels died and took her crimes with them. She reached the top of the platform, her hand outstretched like a claw, her nails aiming for the keyboard, but she never touched it. Fiona stepped out from the shadows of the velvet curtains. My attorney did not look like a woman attending a wedding. She looked like a general inspecting the front lines. She wore a sharp charcoal suit that cost more than Valerie's entire upbringing, and her face was set in a mask of cold, professional disdain. She didn't flinch as the hysterical bride charged her. She simply stepped into Valerie's path, blocking the podium with her own body. Valerie tried to shove her aside, screaming obscenities that would make a sailor blush, but Fiona held her ground. She caught Valerie's wrist in mid-air, her grip looking deceptively casual, but holding the strength of 30 years fighting in the trenches of corporate litigation. "That is evidence, dear," Fiona said, her voice cutting through Valerie's shrieks like a gavel. "And you are tampering with it." Valerie thrashed wildly, trying to use her other hand to scratch Fiona's face, but the wolf pack moved in. 2 of my private security agents materialized on the stage, flanking the women. They were efficient and silent. One grabbed Valerie's left arm, the other her right. They pulled her back from the podium, creating a wall of muscle between the bride and the truth. They didn't hurt her. They simply immobilized her. They held her there, suspended in her rage, her feet kicking uselessly against the floorboards of the stage, her veil torn and hanging off one shoulder. "Let me go," Valerie screamed, spitting at the guards. "You can't touch me. I am pregnant. I am carrying the Ford heir. You are hurting the baby." The crowd gasped again. It was her trump card, her shield. She played the victim card with the expertise of a seasoned grifter, using the unborn child as a hostage to force our compliance. She looked at Brandon, who was slowly pulling himself up from the floor, his face streaked with tears and snot. "Brandon, help me," she wailed. "They are hurting our son. Do something. Kill them." Brandon swayed on his feet. He looked at the guards holding his wife. He looked at me. The conflict in his eyes was pathetic. He had just heard her planning his father's murder, but the biological imperative, the lie she had planted deep in his brain that he was a father, was still fighting for survival. He took a stumbling step toward the stage, his hands balling into weak fists. "Let her go," he croaked, his voice raw. She is pregnant." I watched him. I felt a flicker of something that might have been pity once but was now just disgust. He was still trying to save the fantasy. He was still trying to be the hero in a story where he was the mark. I walked to the center of the stage. I stood next to the podium, my presence looming over the chaotic scene. I pulled the microphone from its stand. "She is right, Brandon," I said, my voice booming through the speakers, drowning out Valerie's protests. "She is pregnant. There is a baby, a distinct biological entity growing inside her." I reached into the inner pocket of my tuxedo jacket. I did not pull out a weapon. I pulled out a simple white envelope. It was sealed with red wax. It looked formal, almost ceremonial. I tapped it against the palm of my hand. The sound was rhythmic, hypnotic. Valerie went still in the grip of the guards. Her eyes locked onto the envelope. She stopped screaming. She stopped kicking. She knew what it was. She recognized the logo of the private medical lab stamped in the corner. Her face drained of color, turning a sickly shade of gray that matched the ash of my cigar. "No," she whispered. Her voice was barely audible. "You can't." I ignored her. I looked down at my son. "You wanted a legacy, Brandon," I said. "You wanted to secure the Ford bloodline. You poisoned your own father. You sold your soul, and you risked prison because she told you that you were building a dynasty." I ripped the envelope open. The sound of tearing paper was louder than a scream in the silent room. I pulled out a single sheet of stiff paper. It was a DNA paternity test report. "I spoke to a young man this morning. I continued, my voice calm and conversational. A personal trainer. His name is Liam. Brandon flinched as if I had slapped him. He knew the name. Liam was the man who trained Valerie 3 times a week. The man Brandon paid for. Liam was very cooperative, I said. Once I explained that Valerie was planning to cut him out of the fortune once I was dead, he was quite eager to share his side of the story. He provided me with a sample, and we compared it against the amniocentesis results Valerie had done last week, the ones she paid cash for so you wouldn't see the bill. I held the paper up to the light. I adjusted my glasses dramatically, letting the suspense stretch until it was almost unbearable. Probability of paternity for Brandon Ford, I read. 0.0%. The gasp from the audience was different this time. It wasn't shock. It was horror. It was the sound of a collective realization that they were witnessing the total annihilation of a man's soul. I lowered the paper and looked directly at Brandon. You are not a father-son. You are a host. You are the wallet she needed to pay for another man's child. You are raising a cuckoo in your nest. Brandon stood frozen. He looked like he had been struck by lightning. His mouth opened, but no sound came out. He looked at Valerie. He looked for a denial. He looked for her to scream that I was lying, that the paper was fake, that it was another one of my tricks. But Valerie said nothing. She hung in the arms of the guards, her head bowed, her hair covering her face. Her silence was a confession louder than any scream. Is it true? Brandon whispered. It was a small, broken sound. Valerie didn't answer. Look at me, Brandon shouted, his voice cracking into a sob. Look at me and tell me he is lying. Tell me it is mine. You swore on your life. Valerie lifted her head. Her eyes were dry now. The fear was gone, replaced by a cold, hard hatred. She looked at Brandon with the disdain one might show a stepped-on insect. It doesn't matter, she spat. You were never going to be a good father anyway. You are too weak. You are just like your old man, but without the brains. Liam is 10 times the man you are. The brutality of the admission hit Brandon like a physical blow. He staggered back, clutching his chest, as if his heart had physically ruptured. The woman he had poisoned his father for, the woman he had signed his life away for, had just confirmed that he was nothing but a utility to her, a means to an end. He fell to his knees. A guttural howl ripped from his throat, a sound of pure animal agony. It echoed off the walls of the ballroom, terrifying the guests. He pounded the floor with his fists, screaming until his voice gave out. I watched him from the stage. I felt nothing. No satisfaction. No sorrow. Just the cold clarity of a balance sheet finally zeroing out. He had made his investment. This was his return. Then the sobbing stopped. Brandon went quiet. He slowly lifted his head. His eyes were red-rimmed and wild. He looked at Valerie, and in that look I saw something new. I saw the weakness evaporate, replaced by a murderous insanity. The love was gone. The adoration was gone. There was only the raw, unfiltered rage of a man who has lost everything and knows exactly who to blame. He stood up. His movements were jerky, uncoordinated. He wiped his face with the back of his hand, smearing the snot and tears. He took a step toward the stage, then another. He wasn't looking at me anymore. He was looking at the bride. You, he whispered. You took everything. He started to run. He scrambled up the stairs to the stage, ignoring the guards, ignoring Fiona, ignoring me. He lunged for Valerie, his hands reaching for her throat, his fingers curved into claws. You lying witch, he screamed, spittle flying from his mouth. I killed for you. I killed him for you, Valerie shrieked, twisting in the guard's grip, trying to put them between her and her husband. The security team braced themselves, ready to intercept him, but the sheer force of his momentum carried him forward. I watched as my son turned into a monster. I watched as he tried to destroy the woman who had made him one. I did not move to stop him. I stood still, holding the DNA test in my hand, like a judge holding a death sentence, watching the inevitable collision of two trains that had been speeding toward disaster for months. But before Brandon's hands could close around her neck, the side doors of the ballroom burst open with a crash that shook the walls. Police. Nobody move. The shout was authoritative, final. Blue uniforms poured into the room. It was over. The trap had snapped shut. But the damage, the beautiful, terrible damage, was done. The heavy double doors swung inward and hit the walls with a thunderous crack that silenced the screaming bride and the sobbing groom. A dozen officers in tactical vests flooded the ballroom, moving with a synchronized precision that contrasted sharply with the messy, emotional carnage on the stage. They fanned out weapons, drawn their boots thudding against the expensive hardwood floor. The guests scrambled backward, knocking over chairs and spilling drinks in a desperate attempt to distance themselves from the targets. Brandon froze. His hands were inches from Valerie's throat. His fingers curled into claws. The sudden intrusion of authority shattered his murderous trance. He blinked, looking from the barrel of the lead officer's gun to his wife's terrified face and finally up to me. I stood on the podium, untouched and unmoving, looking down at him like a judge from the bench. "Police, get on the ground!" the sergeant bellowed, his voice filling the cavernous room. Brandon stumbled back. He looked at his hands as if he didn't recognize them. He looked at the guests, his friends, his business partners, the people he had spent years trying to impress. They were looking at him with revulsion. The mask had slipped completely. They didn't see the golden boy anymore. They saw a patricide in a tuxedo. The humiliation hit him harder than a bullet. I saw it register in his eyes. The realization that he wasn't just caught. He was ruined. His legacy was ash. And I was the one holding the match. His face twisted. The fear evaporated, replaced by a white-hot hatred that defied logic or self-preservation. He didn't drop to his knees. He turned toward me. "You!" he screamed. The sound was raw, guttural. "You did this. You ruined everything." He lunged. He didn't run for the exit. He ran for me. He scrambled up the remaining steps to the podium, his eyes locked on my throat. He wanted to finish what the poison couldn't. He wanted to silence the witness. It was a foolish, desperate move, the last thrashing of a drowning animal. He made it 3 steps. One of the Wolfpack security agents stepped in front of me, casually blocking Brandon's path with a wall of muscle. But he didn't have to do much. A police officer tackled Brandon from the side, sending him crashing into the DJ booth. The sound of breaking equipment and tearing metal screeched through the speakers. "Get off me!" Brandon howled, struggling against the weight of 2 officers who pinned him to the floor. "I wish you were dead, old man. I wish I had doubled the dose." I walked to the edge of the stage and looked down at him. His face was pressed against the floorboards. His tuxedo jacket ripped, his expensive haircut ruined. "That is a confession, son," I said, calmly, speaking into the lapel mic so the entire room could hear. "And I believe the officers have body cameras." Brandon thrashed, spitting curses at me, but the handcuffs clicked shut around his wrists with a sound of finality that rang clearer than any wedding bell. Across the room, Dr. Aris was trying to make himself invisible. He had backed away from the commotion, attempting to blend into a group of terrified catering staff near the service exit. He had removed his glasses and was trying to look like a bystander. Fiona didn't let him get far. She pointed a sharp finger at him, directing the officers with the efficiency of a field commander. "That is the man," she announced, her voice cutting through the din. "Dr. Aris. He has a loaded syringe in his right pocket and a forged medical file in his left. Do not let him leave." Aris bolted. He shoved a waiter aside and lunged for the door, but he was a soft man, a man of desk work and quiet poisons, not physical action. An officer grabbed him by the collar of his ill-fitting suit and slammed him against the wall. I am just the doctor, Aris shrieked, his dignity evaporating. They made me do it. Brandon forced me. I have debts. I am a victim here. The officer spun him around and cuffed him, ignoring his pleas. Valerie was the last to fall. She stood alone on the center of the stage, the security guards having stepped back to let the police take over. She looked around the room, her eyes wide and manic, searching for an escape route, searching for an ally, searching for anyone who would buy the act one last time. She saw the senator. Charles, she cried out, reaching toward him. Help me! You know me! Tell them this is a mistake! Tell them Garrison is crazy! The senator turned his back on her, walking briskly toward the exit, without a backward glance. Valerie let out a sound of pure despair. 2 female officers approached her. They didn't treat her like a delicate pregnant woman. They treated her like a suspect. Hands behind your back, ma'am, one officer ordered. Valerie recoiled. You can't arrest me. I am pregnant. I am wearing a $40,000 dress. Do you know who I am? We know exactly who you are, the officer said, grabbing Valerie's wrist and twisting it behind her back. You are a suspect in a conspiracy to commit capital murder. The cuffs went on. Valerie screamed a high, piercing sound of shattered entitlement. She looked at me, her eyes burning with venom. I will take everything, she hissed. I will sue you for every penny. I will tell the world what you did to us. I walked down the stairs of the stage, slowly, deliberately, until I was standing right in front of her. The officers paused, letting me have my moment. You will tell the world nothing, Valerie, I said softly. Because where you are going, nobody listens. The sergeant in charge of the operation approached me. He was a large man with a face carved from granite. He looked at the chaos around us, then looked at me with a nod of respect. Mr. Ford, he said, we have them in custody. We will need you to come to the station to give a formal statement. Of course, Sergeant, I replied. And sir, the sergeant continued, lowering his voice, my men are sweeping the room, but we need to secure any physical evidence immediately. Do you know where the substance is? I reached into the pocket of my tuxedo. My hand brushed against the plastic bag I had filled in my bathroom hours ago. It felt heavy. It felt like the weight of my son's betrayal condensed into physical form. I pulled it out. The bag was clear. Inside, the colorful capsules rattled. To the untrained eye, they looked like high-end vitamins. But I knew better. I knew they were bullets fired in slow motion. Here it is, I said, handing the bag to the sergeant. He took it carefully, placing it into an evidence bag held by another officer. This is the bottle Brandon gave me this week, I explained, my voice steady. He told me they were for memory, but I had them tested this morning. They are laced with haloperidol and scopolamine, a lethal combination for a man with my heart condition. The sergeant looked at the bag, then at Brandon, who was being hauled to his feet by 2 officers. That is attempted murder, Mr. Ford, the sergeant said grimly, along with conspiracy, fraud, and assault. They are looking at 20 years minimum. I looked at Brandon. He was weeping now, his head hanging low, his spirit broken. He looked small. He looked like the boy who used to cry when he scraped his knee, but I felt no urge to comfort him. That part of me had died the moment I heard his voice on the recording planning my heart attack. Take them away, I said, turning my back on them. I watched the reflection in the mirror on the far wall. I saw the police marching them out. Brandon in his torn tuxedo, Valerie in her ruined wedding dress, Aris in his cheap suit. They were paraded past the guests, past the flowers, past the cake that would never be cut. It was a funeral procession for the living. The ballroom was quiet now, save for the whispers of the guests and the crackle of police radios. The air felt cleaner. The tension had broken. Fiona walked up to me. She placed a hand on my shoulder. It is done, Garrison, she said softly. The papers are filed. The accounts are frozen. The locks on the house are being changed as we speak. They have nothing. I looked at her. I nodded. Thank you, Fiona. I looked around the room one last time. I saw the faces of the elite looking at me with a mixture of fear and awe. They knew I had won. They knew the shark still had teeth, but they also knew the cost. I adjusted my bow tie. I smoothed my jacket. Let's go, I said. I have a plane to catch. I walked out of the ballroom, leaving the wreckage of my family behind. I didn't feel happy. I didn't feel sad. I felt efficient. I felt resolved. I had cleaned the house, and now it was time to live in it alone. The fluorescent lights of the precinct interrogation room hummed with a low, headache-inducing buzz that was a stark contrast to the crystal chandeliers of the Plaza Hotel. The air smelled of stale coffee and industrial cleaner instead of expensive perfume and roses. I sat on a metal chair that was bolted to the floor across a scratched steel table from the man who used to be my son. Brandon was cuffed, his tuxedo jacket gone, his white shirt stained with sweat and the dirt of the ballroom floor. He looked small. He looked like a child who had broken a window and was waiting for the punishment. But this wasn't a broken window. This was a broken life. Fiona stood next to me. She didn't sit. She treated the police station like she treated the courtroom, with absolute command. She placed a stack of documents on the table between us. They were thick, crisp legal papers. The sound of them hitting the metal surface was loud in the small room. Brandon looked at the papers, then up at me. His eyes were red-rimmed. "Dad," he rasped. "Please." I didn't mean it. I was desperate. "Valerie." She got in my head. I didn't answer him. I reached into my pocket and pulled out a pair of reading glasses. I put them on slowly, deliberately. I wasn't there to debate. I was there to foreclose. "Fiona, hand me the first one," I said. Fiona slid a document forward. It was a request for the immediate termination of authorized user status on all revolving credit accounts. "This, Brandon," I said, tapping the paper with my index finger, "is the end of your lifestyle. You see, I checked the statements this morning. You spent $12,000 last month on dinners, $4,000 on clothes, $2,000 on a gym membership you never use." I pulled a pen from my pocket. Not the Mont Blanc I had dropped earlier, but a cheap plastic one I had borrowed from the desk sergeant. "As of this signature," I said, signing my name with a flourish, "every credit card in your wallet is a piece of plastic. The American Express Centurion, the Visa Infinite, the master accounts, all closed." Brandon flinched as the pen scratched the paper. "Dad, you can't," he whispered. I need a lawyer. How am I going to pay for a lawyer?" "That is an excellent question," I said without looking up. "I suppose you will have to use a public defender. I hear they are very hard-working." I handed the paper back to Fiona. She stamped it. The sound was like a gavel coming down. "Next," I said. Fiona slid a set of vehicle registration transfer forms across the table. "The Porsche 911 GT3", I said. "The one I bought you for your 30th birthday. The one you drove here tonight." "I love that car," Brandon choked out. "I know," I said. "It is a beautiful machine. Too beautiful to be sitting in an impound lot while you sit in a cell. I am revoking the gift. The title was always in the family trust, Brandon. And since I control the trust, I am reclaiming the asset." I signed the transfer order. My driver is picking it up from the hotel valet as we speak. I am going to sell it. I think I will donate the proceeds to a charity for victims of elder abuse. It seems fitting, doesn't it? Brandon put his head in his hands. He was shaking. He was realizing that the walls were closing in, not just legally, but financially. He had zero liquidity. He had zero assets. He was naked. But we weren't done. The apartment, I said. The loft in Seaport. The one you have been living in for 5 years, rent-free. The one where you and Valerie planned my murder over my own scotch. Brandon looked up, his eyes wide with panic. Dad, where am I going to go? When I get out on bail, I need a place to live. You assume you are making bail, I said coldly. But even if you do, you won't be going to the Seaport. I signed the eviction notice. It was an emergency order based on criminal activity on the premises. You are evicted effective immediately. The locks will be changed by sunrise. Your clothes and personal effects will be boxed and put in storage. You can pay the storage fees if you ever find a job. If not, they will be auctioned off in 90 days. Brandon started to sob. It was a pathetic sound. He was watching his entire existence evaporate stroke by stroke of a cheap ballpoint pen. He had defined himself by things, by the car, by the zip code, by the plastic in his wallet. Without them, he was nobody. Fiona placed the final document on the table. It was the heaviest of them all. It was a modification to the Garrison Ford Irrevocable Trust. And finally, I said, my voice dropping to a whisper. The big one. The $50 million. Brandon stopped crying. He stared at the document. He knew what it was. It was the prize he had tried to kill for. You know, son, I said, leaning forward, I built this fortune so you would never have to suffer like I did. I wanted to give you the world. All you had to do was wait. All you had to do was love me, or at least pretend to respect me. I looked him in the eye. But you got greedy. You wanted the golden egg, so you cut open the goose. I signed the document. It was the most satisfying signature of my life. I am dissolving your interest in the estate. I am restructuring the entire $50 million portfolio. It is going into a new charitable trust, the Ford Foundation for Mental Health and Cognitive Research. I capped the pen. You are disinherited, Brandon. Completely. Not a dollar, not a cent, not a share of stock. You leave this room with nothing but the suit on your back and the criminal record you earned. Brandon stared at the paper. The ink was still wet. He looked like a man who had just watched a ship sail away with his soul on board. Why, he whispered, why are you doing this? I am your son. I stood up. The metal chair scraped against the floor. No, I said, looking down at him. You aren't my son. My son died the moment he decided I was worth more dead than alive. You are just a stranger who shares my last name, and I don't give money to strangers who try to kill me. I turned to Fiona. File them, I said. Immediately. Fiona gathered the papers. She looked at Brandon with cold indifference. Consider it done, Mr. Ford. I walked to the door. I didn't look back. I heard Brandon screaming my name as I stepped out into the hallway. Dad! Dad, please, I have nothing. I have nothing. I let the heavy steel door slam shut, cutting off his voice. The silence in the hallway was beautiful. I took a deep breath. The air still smelled of cleaner and old coffee, but to me, it smelled like freedom. I had stripped him bare. I had taken back every gift, every safety net, every unearned privilege. He was finally going to have to face the world as a man, not as a millionaire's son. And I was going to face the world as a man who had survived his own family. I adjusted my jacket. I felt lighter. The weight of $50 million was gone, given to a cause that wouldn't try to poison me. I walked toward the exit. The night was still young, and I had a future to plan. The morning sun hit the mahogany desk in my study, illuminating the dust motes dancing in the air. For the first time in months, the house was truly silent. There was no Brandon pacing in the hallway plotting his next ask. There was no Valerie feigning affection while eyeing my silverware. There was just me, a cup of black coffee, and the peace of a man who had surgically removed a tumor from his life. Then the phone rang. It wasn't my cell. It was the landline. The private number only family knew. I let it ring twice, staring at the caller ID. Suffolk County Detention Center. I picked up the receiver. I didn't say hello, I just listened. You have a collect call from an inmate. Valerie Stone. To accept, press 1. I pressed 1. The line clicked and hissed with the static of the prison system. Garrison Valerie's voice came through tinny and small. It lacked the haughty arrogance of the wedding day. It was trembling wet with tears that sounded genuine only because she was the one suffering them. Garrison, are you there? Please don't hang up. I am here, Valerie, I said. My voice was calm, level. I am enjoying my coffee. How is the accommodation? Garrison, please stop, she sobbed. It is horrible here. It is cold. The mattress is thin. There are people screaming. You have to help me. You have to post bail. I took a slow sip of coffee. Bail is set at $5 million, Valerie, I said. The judge considered you a flight risk. Something about a one-way ticket to the Cayman Islands found in your luggage. I didn't mean it, she shrieked. Brandon made me pack it. Listen to me, Garrison. You can't leave me in here. Not like this. She paused, taking a ragged breath. I could hear the desperation shifting gears, the gears of manipulation turning even now, even from behind bars. I am pregnant, she whispered. I am carrying a baby, an innocent baby. You are a grandfather, Garrison. You can't let your grandchild be born in a prison infirmary. It is dangerous. The stress. I could lose the baby. Do you want that on your conscience? I leaned back in my leather chair. I looked at the empty space on the wall where a portrait of Brandon used to hang. I had taken it down an hour ago. You are confused, Valerie, I said. I am not a grandfather. We established that on the stage. The DNA test was quite specific. That baby belongs to Liam. But Brandon loved him, she argued, her voice rising in pitch. Brandon wanted to be the father. That counts for something, doesn't it? This baby, he is part of the story. He is innocent, Garrison. He didn't do anything wrong. You can't punish a child for my mistakes. For the first time in the conversation, she was right. The baby was innocent. He was a biological bystander caught in the crossfire of his mother's greed. I thought about the child growing up in the system, or worse, growing up with Valerie whispering poison in his ear, teaching him that people are targets and love is a transaction. You are right, I said. Valerie gasped. I could hear the hope flare in her chest. I knew it, she breathed. I knew you had a heart. Okay, so call the lawyer. Get me out. We can go to the penthouse. I will stay there under house arrest. I promise I won't cause trouble. Just get me out of here for the baby. I didn't move. I didn't call the lawyer. I am not getting you out, Valerie, I said. You belong in there. You tried to kill me. You tried to gaslight me into an asylum. You are a predator, and predators belong in cages. But the baby, she screamed. I have a solution for the baby, I interrupted. I picked up a pen and tapped it against the desk. I spoke to Liam again this morning. He is a decent young man. A bit naive, perhaps, but he isn't a killer. He wants his son. He wants to raise him. But he doesn't have the money. Personal trainers don't make enough to fight a custody battle against the state. So Valerie spat. What does that have to do with me? Everything I said. Here is the deal. I have set up a trust fund. It is generous. It covers medical expenses, private education, clothing, housing. Everything a child could need from birth to age 21. It ensures that this boy will never want for anything. He will have the life Brandon had, but without the toxicity. Valerie was silent. She was calculating. She thought she had found an opening. That is generous, Garrison. Okay, so I get out and I raise him with this money. No, I said. The word was a hammer blow. The trust fund has a condition, a single non-negotiable condition. It only activates if you sign a full surrender of parental rights. Today, what she whispered. You sign the baby over to Liam, I continued. You grant him full sole physical and legal custody. You waive all visitation rights. You remove yourself from that child's life permanently. You want me to give up my baby, she asked, her voice shaking with disbelief. I want you to save your baby, I corrected. If you keep him, he enters the foster system while you await trial. He starts his life as a ward of the state. If you are convicted, which you will be, he grows up visiting his mother through bulletproof glass. Is that what you want? Or do you want him to be safe? You are a monster, she hissed. You are using my child against me. I am using your child to save him from you, I said coldly. You used him as a shield, Valerie. You used him as a bargaining chip to steal $50 million. You don't want a son. You want an anchor. You want a reason for the judge to be lenient. I let the silence stretch. I could hear the background noise of the jail, the shouting of guards, the clanging of doors. Liam is waiting with a lawyer in the visitor's room right now, I said, checking my watch. He has the papers. If you sign them, the trust activates immediately. Liam gets the support he needs. The baby gets a future. And you get the knowledge that for once in your miserable life you did something selfless. And if I don't sign, she asked defiantly. Then I hang up, I said. And I don't pick up again. You go to trial with a public defender. The baby goes into the system, and you rot, alone, penniless, and despised. There was a long pause. I heard her breathing jagged and wet. She was cornered. She had played the Game of Thrones, and she had lost. She realized that the only power she had left was the power to destroy her own child, and I was betting that deep down beneath the layers of greed, there was a microscopic grain of humanity left. Or maybe she just realized that without the money, the baby was a burden she couldn't afford. Send him in, she whispered. Her voice was dead. Good choice, I said. And Garrison, she added. Yes. I hope you die alone in that big empty house. I looked around my study. It was quiet. It was safe. It was mine. I already died, Valerie, I said. You killed the man I was. The man who is left, he likes being alone. I hung up the phone. I didn't slam it down. I placed it gently in the cradle. I felt a weight lift off my shoulders. The baby was safe. The legacy was protected. The loose ends were tied. I finished my coffee. It was cold, but it tasted like victory. I stood up and walked to the window looking out over the estate I had built. It was a beautiful day. The sun was shining. The birds were singing, and I was free. The auction was quick, efficient, and brutal. The mansion in Back Bay, the physical monument to my life's work, went to a 26-year-old tech billionaire who wanted a historic trophy home. He paid $5 million over the asking price. I didn't care about the money. I cared about the exorcism. I stood in the grand foyer one last time. It was empty. The furniture Brandon had selected to impress his friends was gone. The portraits of a happy family that never really existed had been taken down, leaving pale rectangles on the wallpaper like scars. The house was just wood and stone now. It held no ghosts because I had evicted them all. I didn't feel nostalgia. I didn't feel grief. I felt the deep satisfaction of closing a file that had remained open for far too long. I walked out the front door and tossed the heavy brass keys to the real estate agent. It is all yours, I said. Burn it down for all I care. Just make sure the check clears. I walked down the stone steps to the waiting car. I didn't look back. There is a rule in demolition: once the charges are set, you walk away. You don't watch the dust settle. The car didn't take me to the office. It didn't take me to a board meeting. It took me to Hanscom Field, the private air terminal outside the city. My Gulfstream G650 was waiting on the tarmac, gleaming silver under the afternoon sun. It was a machine built for distance, for escape. I had owned it for a decade, but I had only ever used it for business. I had been too busy building a legacy for a son who wanted me dead to ever use it for myself. I walked up the stairs. The air was thin and smelled of jet fuel and possibility. The stewardess met me at the door with a glass of champagne. "Where to first, Mr. Ford?" she asked, holding the tray. I looked at the horizon. I thought about the itinerary I had built in my head for 40 years. The vineyards of Tuscany, the temples of Kyoto, the beaches of the Maldives, places I had promised myself I would see when I retired. When Brandon was settled, when the work was done. The work was done. "Head south," I said, taking the glass. "Keep going until the water turns turquoise. Then we will decide." I sat in the leather captain's chair. The engines roared to life, a deep, powerful vibration that signaled movement, forward motion. We taxied to the runway. I looked out the window as the Boston skyline tilted and shrank beneath us. Somewhere down there in the gray grid of the city, Brandon was sitting in a cell, realizing that his inheritance was a prison sentence. Somewhere down there, Valerie was learning that beauty fades, but a criminal record is forever. I took a sip of the champagne. It was cold, crisp, and clean. It tasted like 50 years of deferred gratification finally arriving all at once. The plane accelerated. The G-force pushed me back into the seat, holding me like a protective hand. We lifted off. The city became a toy set. The problems that had consumed me for decades became invisible. I opened my passport. It was relatively empty of stamps. That was going to change. I had a lot of catching up to do. I had a life to live that belonged only to me. No dependents, no heirs, no leeches. People tell you that family is everything. They tell you that a man without a son has no future. They are wrong. My future wasn't the ungrateful man rotting in Suffolk County. My future was the horizon. My future was the silence in my head, where the worry used to be. I watched the clouds rushing past, white and endless. I felt a peace I hadn't known since I was a boy, before the money, before the empire, before the betrayal. I took a deep breath, filling my lungs with the pressurized air of the cabin. I lost a son that week. I lost a daughter-in-law. I lost the illusion of a dynasty. But as the plane banked toward the ocean, and the world opened up before me vast and beautiful, and mine, I realized the truth. I lost a son. But I found myself. And looking at the endless blue sky, I knew one thing for certain. It was the best deal I ever made. We are often told that family is unconditional, that blood is thicker than water. But I learned the hard way that blood can also be poison. You cannot buy loyalty, and you certainly cannot buy love. The greatest tragedy wasn't losing my son. It was realizing I had sacrificed my own peace for years for people who viewed me only as a paycheck. True wealth isn't found in a bank account or a penthouse suite. It is found in the freedom to walk away from those who do not respect you. Never set yourself on fire just to keep ungrateful people warm. If you believe that respect must be earned and betrayal must be punished, hit that like button and subscribe for more stories of cold, hard justice.